And just before I closed the door, I whispered not aloud, but inside myself, where truth always begins. Evelyn, don't you dare forget this. I didn't, I never will, and neither will they, for the next few days. I moved around my house like a woman who'd misplaced her shadow. Something inside me had shifted, not broken, not shattered, but rearranged, like a piece of furniture moved in the night. You walk into the room and sense instantly that something is different. Even before your eyes adjust. I kept remembering the sound of the restaurant doors closing behind them, the faint click, the finality of it, the cold sandwich cooling further in my hands, the way Jasper had curled up beside me, sensing my sorrow better than my own child. I replayed every detail until each moment felt etched into the underside of my ribs. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream or slam doors. At 76 you learn that shouting only exhausts the throat, not the soul. Instead, I went quiet, not out of defeat, but out of gathering. I felt like a storm cloud forming in slow, deliberate layers, pulling its power inward until the air around it changed. Sometimes, revenge doesn't begin with rage. Sometimes it begins with silence. A silence that listens, watches, waits. Nathaniel and Lydia mistook my quiet for compliance. They always had. They believed that endurance was the same as weakness. They believed that my love meant I would accept anything. And why wouldn't they? I had spent years cushioning their falls, softening their mistakes, letting their selfishness slide off my back, like rain on old stone. But that night in the car had shown me a truth I could no longer unknow. They didn't want to protect me. They wanted to contain me. An elderly mother makes a terrible accessory, after all, so when they visited the next Sunday, I served tea as usual. I smiled as usual. I asked about Nathaniel's work, listened to Lydia describe the latest restaurant she simply adored, and pretended not to notice how she wiped invisible crumbs from the arm of my sofa whenever she sat down. But beneath my polite nods, something electric hummed through me, a quiet readiness, a sharpening. That day, as they were leaving, Nathaniel paused in the foyer to adjust his cuff. He looked older than his 39 years, tired, strained, a man stretched thin by a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Yet he still carried himself with the fragile arrogance of someone who believes he can bluff his way out of every consequence. "Mom," he said casually, "Lydia and I were thinking, maybe you should consider downsizing. This house is getting too big for you." Ah, there it was, the real project, hidden under the guise of care. I answered softly, "I like my home just fine." He lifted his eyebrows as if I'd said something unreasonable. "It's only a suggestion. We want you to be comfortable." Comfortable. The same word they used before leaving me in the car. Lydia slipped her arm through his and added, "A smaller place might be more age-appropriate." I felt my pulse throb at my throat, but my smile remained serene. "I'll think about it." I said it was enough. Enough to keep them unworried, unwary, enough to keep them speaking in the loose, unguarded way of people who believe they're talking to someone harmless. Over the next several weeks, cracks in their carefully painted lives began to show. I overheard things. Small things at first. Nervous whispers from Nathaniel when he stepped into the hallway to take private calls. Lydia's tight voice, drifting through my doorway when she thought I was asleep. Phrases like, "The payment went through barely. We can't keep juggling like this." Another overdraft fee. That trip was necessary for networking. Their house of glass was already splintering. All I had to do was pay attention. And I did. I paid attention the way I used to monitor troubled students, softly, invisibly, while knitting together truths they didn't realize they were revealing. One afternoon, Nathaniel came over to fix a loose screen door. He thought I was in the kitchen, but I stood just out of sight in the hallway. He paced the porch, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't have the funds," he snapped. The rate jumped again. "No, we can't refinance, our credit score tanked after the last loan. Just give me time. We'll figure something out." He hung up with a sigh that sounded like surrender. Then he leaned on the porch railing as though his bones had suddenly grown heavy. In that moment, I saw the man he'd become. A man drowning in a life he couldn't afford. A man who would rather humiliate his mother than let anyone see him flounder. And I felt not pity, not anger, resolve, because when people show you who they are, as Maya Angelou once said, you must believe them. Nathaniel had shown me in the parking lot of a restaurant exactly who he was, and now life was showing me exactly where he was vulnerable. I didn't rush. I didn't plot revenge with fire in my eyes. I moved with the slow deliberation of an old oak, preparing for winter, roots deepening, branches strengthening, bark thickening against frost. 1 month after overhearing his call, I scheduled a quiet appointment with a financial advisor, a woman named Celeste Marrow, whose hands were steady and whose eyes carried the sharpness of someone who had seen every kind of desperation walk through her office door. She listened carefully as I explained my situation. I did not exaggerate. I did not dramatize. I spoke plainly, the way you speak about a wound you have finally decided to treat. When I finished, Celeste leaned back and said, "It sounds like you're done being stepped on." The simplicity of her words nearly made me cry. We reviewed documents. We assessed my finances. We discussed legal mechanisms I didn't know existed but quickly learned to understand. And then she made a suggestion, so cleanly brilliant I felt the air shift around us. "You could purchase their mortgage." I blinked. "Purchase it?" She nodded. "The bank holds it now, but banks sell loans all the time. If you want leverage and protection, that is the cleanest path." I let the idea settle into my bones. Slowly, savoringly, "Could they refuse?" I asked. "Not if they never know." Celeste smiled with the gentlest edge. "We do it quietly, legally, efficiently, and once I own it, then they pay you, not the bank." A long, soft breath escaped me. Something inside me, some long-ignored ember, glowed to life. She continued, "And if they fail to pay you," her eyes flicked down to the documents, "you will have the right to call the loan due entirely, or take the home." The silence between us thickened. For years, I had been the one they leaned on, the safety net beneath their careless acrobatics. They had mistaken my love for stupidity. They had mistaken my age for weakness, but in that moment, sitting in a warm office under soft fluorescent lights, I understood a truth as old as time. People who assume you are powerless never imagine you could become the one holding the strings. When I left Celeste's office, I felt taller. Not younger, no. Age is its own truth, but steadier, more rooted. I walked to my car slowly, feeling every step as if my feet were learning the earth again. The sun was bright, but not harsh. A breeze lifted the hem of my cardigan, and for the first time in months, my breath did not taste like fear, it tasted like possibility. I moved quietly after that. Quiet is a tool, you see, a grandmother's greatest weapon. I didn't change my routines. I still went to church on Sundays. I still brewed my lavender tea at sunset. I still fed the sparrows that gathered on my windowsill each morning. But under that calm surface, the machinery of my plan turned like a hidden gear. Celeste handled the legalities. I handled patience. Nathaniel and Lydia grew more desperate by the week. Their mortgage payment was late once, then on time but barely, then late again. Arguments spilled from their house when I visited, whispers of missed deadlines, canceled vacations, mounting bills. One evening, Lydia arrived at my door with a box of pastries and a smile that glimmered like a cracked mirror. "Oh, Evelyn," she cooed, "you're looking so pale. Are you eating well?" It was the first time she'd come alone. A reconnaissance mission, a softening tactic. I let her inside. I poured tea. I listened as she casually mentioned the rising cost of living, and unexpected financial pressures and the unfair interest rates on their mortgage. I made sympathetic noises. I offered no solutions. I did not give her what she wanted, an invitation to ask for money. She left, frustrated. Good. Patience. Patience is how Redditors survive. Patience is how grandmothers outmaneuvered the smug. The next time both she and Nathaniel visited, they came with urgency painted across their faces. The kind of urgency that sweats through expensive clothes. They asked to talk. We sat in the living room. Nathaniel cleared his throat twice before speaking. "Mom, we need your help." Ah, there it was. The moment the storm cloud opens its eyes. I waited for them to continue. "We're in a serious situation," he said, voice trembling with manufactured humility. "Our mortgage, well, the terms changed. There's a balloon payment coming up. We can't refinance. And if we don't come up with a large sum soon, we could lose the house." He said lose the house the way a child says monster in the closet. Soft, trembling, believing fear alone could summon sympathy. Lydia leaned forward, hands folded neatly. "Evelyn, we are out of options. We need a loan. A temporary one, just enough to keep us afloat." A loan. From me, the woman they left in a car with their dog. I spoke gently, almost apologetically. "How much do you need?" They exchanged a relieved glance. They thought they had me. While Nathaniel listed numbers, desperate numbers, I drifted inward briefly, hearing again the faint bite of the restaurant door closing behind me. When his speech ended, I nodded slowly. "I can help," I said. I never thought the slow unraveling of a family could make a sound. But in my house, It always started the same way, like the faint creak of a floorboard in an empty hallway. A sound you'd ignore at first, thinking it was just the wind or old wood settling. But then it came again, soft, persistent, like a memory you've tried too hard to bury. That's how it began with my son. Not with shouting or slammed doors. No, it began with quiet things. The way he looked past me at the kitchen table. The way he stopped calling me mom and started calling me mom, like it was a formality. The way his wife smiled at me, her lips stretching but her eyes staying cold. Like she was doing a kindness she expected applause for. People think heartbreak arrives loudly, but mine came on little cat feet, polite and almost apologetic. It tiptoed into my life as if asking permission to ruin me. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 76 years old. I've lived long enough to know storms don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they arrive in cashmere coats and practiced smiles, holding a leash in one hand and a cold sandwich in the other. I raised my boy, Nathaniel, in a blue house at the end of Laurel Ridge Lane. A simple house, a good house, the sort of home where the kettle whistled every morning and the mailman knew my birthday. My husband, may his soul rest easy, used to tell me the world outside might be loud, but inside our home, we would always keep a soft place to land. I believed him. I still do, even though that softness grew sharp edges after he passed. Grief is a strange sculptor. It chisels you thinner in some places and heavier in others. After he died, Nathaniel stepped in, or at least he pretended to. He came with casserole dishes and lectures about safety rails. He said things like, "Mom, I worry about you," as if worry were a form of love instead of control. Then he married Lydia, a woman whose elegance could slice a diamond. She spoke softly, but everything she said felt like it had been ironed flat beforehand, crisp and without warmth. She wore fragrances that cost as much as my monthly grocery budget, fragrances that covered every room she walked into. As if the air itself had to be corrected. I didn't dislike her at first. I tried to welcome her, though she made it clear she was tolerating me the way one tolerates a chirping smoke alarm. At holidays, she complimented my cooking in a tone that made it sound like charity work. "Oh, Evelyn, this stew is very homespun." Homespun. I used to take that word as a compliment. Under her tongue, it became something else. Nathaniel changed under her influence, like wet clay left too long in the sun. He hardened. He cracked in places. He became a man who worried more about appearances than people, more about what others would say than what his mother felt. And somewhere in that slow shift, he began to see me not as the woman who raised him, but as an aging problem that needed managing. They said it gently, they always did. "Mom, we just want what's best for you. You shouldn't strain yourself. You know you get overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. An interesting choice of word. I survived widowhood, cancer, at 59, and a house fire when I was 24. But apparently a crowded restaurant would undo me. It started with little decisions taken out of my hands. Nathaniel installed a digital thermostat so you don't have to fuss with the dial, then locked me out of it remotely. They hired a woman to check on me twice a week, just to help with errands though. I was perfectly capable of buying my own groceries. Lydia went through my pantry one day and threw out anything she deemed too processed, including my salted peanuts, which I'd enjoyed since I was 18. They were rearranging my life like a room they planned to renovate, and I, foolishly hopeful, allowed it because I thought it came from love. I thought love might look different now that my son had grown into a man. I didn't know then that real love never requires you to shrink to fit someone else's picture, but the real breaking point came on a night dressed in gold. Lights and lies. Nathaniel got promoted at his firm. Regional director. He said the title with such pride that I felt my heart swell, even though I knew his joy was a thin mask for the panic that always clung to him lately. He insisted I come to the celebration dinner. Not asked, insisted, and I, wanting to feel like family again, said yes, without hesitation. I wore my best navy blouse, the one with pearl buttons, that Charles used to fasten for me with trembling fingers when his arthritis wasn't too bad. I curled my hair the way he liked it, soft waves around my temples. I even wore lipstick, a dusty rose that made me look almost youthful in the dim light of my dressing mirror. When I looked at my reflection, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile, foolish, lovely hope. They arrived late, of course. Lydia swept into my living room like a gust of cold perfume, her heels clicking a warning across my wooden floors. She looked me up and down with that polished smile, the kind that's been sanded smooth of sincerity. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, "you look so sweet, like a child in Sunday clothes." Nathaniel barely looked at me. He was on his phone, murmuring something about stock options and quarterly projections. When he finally pocketed it, he gave me a hurried kiss on the cheek and said, "Let's go, Mom. Traffic's building." And that was my first warning their impatience. I moved slower these days. My knees weren't the loyal companions they once were, but instead of walking beside me, they hurried ahead, leaving me to catch up like a forgotten shadow. The restaurant, Marlowe and Finch rose from the sidewalk like a cathedral built for worshipping wealth. Tall glass doors framed by gold fixtures, soft music that spilled out from within like a promise of belonging. Inside, the chandeliers glowed like floating constellations. Every table shimmered with crystal glasses and plates arranged like works of art. For a moment, I felt young again, alive, part of something grand. Until Lydia placed her hand on my arm. It was light, gentle, but deadly in its intent. "Evelyn," she said softly, "let's take a moment." Nathaniel stood beside her, avoiding my eyes. She leaned in, her voice dipped in artificial concern. "You know how overwhelming places like this can be. So many people, so much noise. We were thinking," she smiled, "that it might be better for you to wait in the car." I blinked. "In the car?" Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Just for tonight, Mom. It's a work event, and I don't want you to feel out of place. There's a lot happening." I looked at him, looked at this man I had carried for 9 months, raised for 18 years, protected for all the years after, and I did not recognize him. Not even a little. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small brown paper bag. "Lydia packed you something, just until we're done inside." My fingers trembled as I took it. Inside was a half-cold sandwich turkey, dry edges curled. The kind someone makes quickly when they don't care who eats it. Lydia added, "We left the car unlocked, and we brought Jasper." Jasper, their fluffy Pomeranian. A dog who had more outfits than I did. And so there I was 76 years old, eating a cold sandwich, in the back seat of my own car, while the two people I loved most in the world enjoyed champagne and chandeliers. I didn't cry at first. I stared at the dashboard lights glowing faintly in the dark. I listened to the muffled laughter flowing from the restaurant doors. I felt the quiet press into my bones like a bruise blooming under skin. Then Jasper climbed into my lap, tail wagging. He licked a crumb off my sleeve. And that tiny gesture of kindness, a dog's simple affection, broke me open. The tears came hard and silent, sliding down my cheeks in long, shaking lines. I cried for the girl I used to be, for the woman I had become, for the mother I had tried to be. I cried for the years I had given without asking anything in return. And most of all, I cried because I suddenly understood something I had been too afraid to admit. My son did not love me, not anymore, maybe not ever, in the way I thought he did. I sat there until my tears dried into thin, salty traces. I watched the restaurant door open and close, casting little rectangles of golden light onto the pavement. I watched strangers arrive, smiling, and strangers leave content. When Nathaniel and Lydia finally returned, they didn't ask how I was. They didn't apologize. They didn't even notice my eyes were red. Lydia checked her makeup in the passenger mirror. Nathaniel hummed along to the radio like nothing significant had happened. Nothing significant to them. Asterisk, to me. It was the night something inside me snapped, like a thin bone under too much pressure, not anger, not yet clarity. The kind that arrives like winter frost cold, revealing, merciless. Because sitting there in that car, wiping tears with the back of a trembling hand, I understood something with a certainty that chilled me. To my core, they thought I was powerless. And people who believe you are powerless stop pretending to be kind. I didn't speak on the drive home. I didn't trust my voice. It felt like something fragile caught in my throat, a glass ornament one breath away from breaking. But as we pulled into my driveway, a thought came to me with the softness of snowfall. The quiet of prayer. If they could humiliate me so completely, they could do much worse, and if I didn't start protecting myself, no one would. That was the beginning. That was the first ember. The beginning of the fire I never planned to ignite but eventually watched burn beautifully through every corner of their carefully curated lives. I stepped out of the car slowly, feeling the cold night air fill my lungs like a promise. Their faces lit like Christmas, but not with alone. Confusion thickened the air. Instead, I reached for a folder on the coffee table, a folder Celeste had prepared with meticulous detail. "I've already taken steps," I said quietly, "to protect you, to protect all of us." Nathaniel frowned. "What do you mean?" I opened the folder. "I purchased your mortgage." Silence. Not the soft kind. The heavy kind. The kind that presses against your lungs. Lydia blinked rapidly. You what? I own your home loan now, I said gently. You won't deal with the bank anymore. You'll deal with me. They stared at me as though I'd suddenly grown antlers. I explained the terms, the safeguards, the structure of the arrangement. Their faces shifted from confusion to relief, to horror, as they realized the fine print was tighter than they'd expected. We have to pay this much, Nathaniel whispered. Yes, the agreement is binding. You signed it when you arrived. Their eyes darted to the signatures already drying on the last page. They hadn't read it. Of course, they hadn't. People who think you're weak never read carefully. Lydia's voice cracked. Evelyn, this is unfair. I folded my hands in my lap. Unfair, I repeated softly. Like leaving your mother in a dark parking lot to eat alone, with your dog. Nathaniel's face drained of color, and telling her it was for her own good. Silence again. But this time, it tasted like justice. Nathaniel tried to speak, but grief and pride clogged his throat. For the first time in years, he looked like the little boy who used to grip my skirt when thunderstorms frightened him. But that boy was long gone, replaced by a man who believed comfort was something owed to him, and compassion something he could ration out only when convenient. Mom, please, he whispered, don't do this. We can't lose the house. I looked at him not with anger, not with triumph, but with a sorrow so deep it felt older than my bones. Losing a house, I said quietly, is nothing compared to losing your compassion. Lydia folded into herself, the mask finally slipping, revealing a woman terrified not of losing shelter, but of losing status, losing image, losing the life she built on borrowed shine. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't loud. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it settles like frost, clean quiet, inevitable. You will have 90 days to sell the house, I told them, my voice steady as winter air. That will repay what you owe. After that, the debt becomes mine to collect in full. Nathaniel covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. I had never seen him cry as an adult, not even at his father's funeral. Perhaps grief had never cut him deep enough. Consequence, though, that reached him. I touched his shoulder gently. I warned you for years, I said softly. You cannot treat people like furniture and expect them to hold your weight forever, not even your mother. They left my house like two people walking away from a burning building, slow, stunned, clutching what little pride they had left. In the months that followed, the sale went through. They moved into a modest apartment, small, plain, and honest. A place that didn't care who they pretended to be. And as strange as it sounds, they softened. Pride evaporates quickly when there's no marble floor to catch it. Nathaniel's calls became gentler. Lydia's voice lost its sharp edge. They stopped seeing me as a burden, or a pawn, or a bank account waiting to be cracked open. They saw me finally as a person. One autumn afternoon, Nathaniel visited alone. No desperate agenda, no rehearsed charm. He simply sat across from me, hands folded, eyes tired but clear. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, for everything. I learned the hard way what I should have learned when Dad was alive. You tried to raise me right. I'm the one who walked away from that. I nodded, letting his words settle like leaves on water. You're learning now, I whispered. That's enough. He took my hand. It was the first time in years I felt the warmth of my son without strings attached. And in that moment, I realized something important. My revenge had never been about punishment. It had been about awakening. It had been about teaching him the lesson life withheld until it was almost too late. Age gives you many things: aches, wisdom, soft mornings, quiet nights, but the greatest gift is clarity. We cannot choose how our children love us. We can only choose how we love ourselves when they fail. Now, when I sit by my window with a cup of tea, Jasper curled at my feet, I watch the evening settle across the neighborhood rooftops. The sky goes gold, then rose, then violet, a slow, gentle surrender. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Sometimes I wonder if I should have forgiven sooner. But then I remember the cold sandwich, the dark car, the feeling of being less than human to the people I loved most. And I remind myself, respect is not a gift you beg for. It's a boundary you build. I am old, yes, but I am no one's burden, no one's shadow, no one's forgotten branch on the family tree. I survived heartbreak, I survived humiliation, and I survived the moment I decided to stop shrinking to fit inside the story. Someone else wrote for me. Now the story is mine again, and the ending. I choose to keep soft. Because even after everything, love doesn't leave me. It simply becomes wiser, quieter, and strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet. Just like me.